The daily life of a Roman aqueduct worker. We're heading back to the Roman Empire, a civilization renowned for its legions, its emperors, and its truly epic engineering projects. We're not marching into battle, though. Instead, we're going to look at the lifeblood of Rome's cities, the aqueducts, and the people who built and maintained them. We see these magnificent structures marching across the landscape on elegant arches, symbols of Roman power and ingenuity, bringing clean water to bustling cities. But the brutal reality for the men who built these wonders was far from elegant. It was a life of back-breaking labour in quarries and tunnels, of constant danger from rockfalls and disease, of meticulous, thankless work performed far from the grateful citizens who benefited, all to ensure that a senator's bathhouse had good water pressure. The year is 80 AD. The Emperor Titus rules Rome. You're a farmer from a small village in the hills of Campania, and the surveyors have just arrived. Your world is defined by the rhythm of the seasons and the contours of the land. You know the slope of every hill, the source of every spring. Your life is hard, but predictable. Then, one day, strangers appear. They are not soldiers, though they move with a similar discipline. They are Roman agrimensores, land surveyors, accompanied by engineers, architecti, and a small contingent of legionaries for protection. They carry strange instruments, tall staffs marked with increments, sighting devices called grome, and long wooden levels known as corybates. They speak Latin, the language of power, not your local Oscan dialect. They begin walking your land, driving stakes into the ground, taking measurements, arguing over angles. A sense of unease settles over your village. What do these men want? Rumours fly. Are they reassessing taxes? Planning a new road? Then the official announcement comes, delivered by a local magistrate who seems just as bewildered as you are. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom and generosity, has decreed that a new aqueduct must be built to supply the booming port city of Puteoli. And the chosen route runs directly through your valley. More specifically, the source of the purest spring, the one your village has relied upon for generations, has been identified as the Caput Aquae, the headwater for this grand new project. You're presented with a choice, though it doesn't feel much like one. You can sell your land to the state at a price determined by the imperial engineers, a price that is, shall we say, non-negotiable. Or you can resist. Resisting the emperor's will is generally considered a poor long-term strategy in the Roman world. Furthermore, the project needs labour, vast amounts of it. While much of the heavy work might be done by legions during peacetime or by slaves, skilled and unskilled local labour is essential. You are a strong man, used to working with stone and earth. You are offered a position, a wage paid in bronze sestataii, and daily rations. It is more money than you have ever seen. Enough, perhaps, to buy a better plot of land elsewhere once the project is done. If it ever gets done, you look at your small, rocky fields. You look at the stakes driven across them by the Roman surveyors, marking a path you cannot comprehend. Your old life is over. Whether you like it or not, you accept. You pack a small bag with a spare tunic and your sharpening stone. You join a growing crowd of other local men, farmers, woodcutters, quarrymen, who have also been drawn into the orbit of this immense undertaking. You are no longer just a farmer. You are now a number, a resource, a small drop in the river of manpower required to build Rome's liquid highway. It's a career change forced upon you by eminent domain and the emperor's unquenchable thirst. Or rather, his city's thirst. Your new life begins at the source, high in the hills. The engineers have already begun transforming the landscape. The spring your village cherished is now the centre of a bustling, noisy construction site. A large basin, the Piscina Limaria, is being excavated around it, a settling tank designed to allow sand and debris to sink before the water enters the aqueduct channel. You are assigned to a gang digging the foundations for this basin under the watchful eye of a Roman foreman, a retired legionary centurion whose vocabulary seems limited to various creative ways of shouting faster. The work is brutal, relentless. You are digging through rocky soil with simple iron picks and shovels. Your tools are effective but heavy. Your hands, accustomed to the wooden handle of a plough, quickly become a mass of blisters. The sun beats down. Dust fills the air. You work in teams, loosening the earth, loading it into reed baskets, and carrying the heavy baskets up out of the excavation pit to be dumped nearby. It is a continuous human conveyor belt, powered by sweat and aching muscles. There are no breaks, save for a short, hurried midday meal of coarse bread, olives, and sour wine mixed with water, posca. You sleep in a temporary workers' camp, a rough settlement of wooden huts and tents thrown up near the worksite. It's crowded, unsanitary, and noisy. You share a cramped hut with 10 other men, sleeping on piles of straw that quickly become infested with fleas. Disease is rampant, fevers, dysentery, coughs that settle deep in your lungs. The camp has a basic infirmary run by an army medicus, but his treatments often seem worse than the disease. Life here is cheap. An injury that prevents you from working means you are dismissed, sent home with no pay. A serious illness is often a death sentence. You quickly learn the hierarchy of the worksite. At the bottom are the unskilled labourers like yourself, the diggers, the carriers. Above you are the semi-skilled workers, the men who mix the mortar, the carpenters who build the scaffolding and concrete forms. Then come the true artisans, the stonemasons, the lapidarii, who carve the blocks with precision, and the plasterers who will line the water channel. And above them all, moving with an air of detached authority, are the engineers, the architects and the surveyors, the men who understand the plans, the mysterious calculations that make this whole impossible project feasible. They speak a different language, both literally and figuratively. They deal in numbers, angles, and gradients. You deal in dirt. The work progresses along the planned route, moving down from the hills towards the distant city. The aqueduct channel itself, the spacus, begins to take shape. For much of its length, it is not the magnificent arched structure of popular imagination. Aqueducts ran underground or at ground level whenever possible. It was cheaper, safer, and protected the water from contamination and evaporation. Your gang is now digging trenches, miles and miles of them, following the precise lines laid out by the surveyor's stakes. The trench must maintain a constant, gentle, almost imperceptible downward slope. Too steep, and the water will flow too fast, eroding the channel. Too shallow, and the water will stagnate. The engineers are gods of the gradient. You watch them use their corrubates, a long wooden plank, perhaps 20 feet long, with a groove for water or plumb bobs, used as a spirit level, checking the slope of the trench floor with obsessive precision. The ideal gradient is incredibly slight, perhaps a drop of only 1 foot for every 300 feet of length. Maintaining this over dozens of miles, through hills and valleys, using only these simple tools, it seems like magic, but it is the science of Roman engineering, a mastery of practical geometry, learned through generations of experience. Once the trench is dug, the channel itself is constructed. Often it is built using opus cementitium, Roman concrete. This is another area where you are put to work. You are part of a team mixing the concrete. A combination of lime mortar, volcanic ash, pozzolana, which gives it incredible strength and water, resistance, and aggregate like sand and gravel. It is heavy, dusty work, mixing the ingredients with water in large wooden troughs. Carpenters build wooden forms in the trench, and you haul buckets of the wet grey concrete and pour it into the forms. It hardens slowly into a solid, monolithic structure, a stone riverbed created by human hands. Sometimes the channel is lined with stone slabs or specially curved terracotta tiles cemented together. Whatever the method, the final and most crucial step is the waterproofing. The inside of the Hespecus must be lined with a special waterproof plaster called opus signinum. This is a mixture of lime mortar, pozzolana, and crushed terracotta pottery. You watch the specialist plasterers apply this pinkish red substance in multiple layers, smoothing it with wooden floats until it creates a seamless, watertight surface. They work with the focus of artists, their movements precise and economical. The quality of their work is paramount. A single leak could undermine the entire structure, wasting precious water and potentially causing catastrophic erosion. It's the most important and probably most boring part of the job, making sure the plumbing doesn't leak on a scale measured in miles. Your journey down the line brings you to a new challenge, a hill. The aqueduct cannot flow uphill. The Roman engineers have three options: go around it, go over it, or go through it. Going around is often the longest and most expensive option. Going over requires building arches, which we'll get to. But sometimes the most direct route is straight through. And so you become a tunneler. This is the most dangerous, most claustrophobic, and most terrifying work on the entire project. The engineers, using their surveying tools with incredible skill, plot the course of the tunnel. They sink vertical shafts, puttae, down from the surface at regular intervals along the planned route. These shafts serve multiple purposes: ventilation, removal of spoil, and providing access points for the tunneling teams. You are assigned to a team working at the bottom of one of these shafts. Your world shrinks to a small, dark, damp space, lit only by flickering oil lamps. The air is thick with stone dust and the smell of human sweat. Your job is to chip away at the rock face. You work in pairs. One man holds a hard iron chisel, the other swings a heavy mallet. Clang, clang, clang. The sound is deafening in the confined space. Progress is agonizingly slow, perhaps only a few feet a day. The rock dust coats your lungs. The constant jarring impact travels up your arms, into your shoulders, into your bones. It is brutal, mind-numbing labour. You have no idea if you are heading in the right direction. You are working blind, guided only by the foreman's occasional checks with a plumb line dropped from the shaft above. You put your faith in the unseen engineers, hoping their calculations were correct. The greatest danger is the rock itself. Unexpected fissures can cause sections of the roof to collapse, crushing the men below. Pockets of methane gas can build up, suffocating the workers or causing explosions. Underground springs can flood the tunnel without warning. You work in constant low-level terror. Every creak of the rock, every trickle of water, sounds like a death knell. The oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows that play tricks on your eyes. You feel utterly cut off from the world above, buried alive in the service of the Emperor's thirst. It's like being a coal miner, but instead of coal, you're digging towards water, very, very slowly. But there are moments of strange, grim satisfaction. One day you hear a new sound through the rock face ahead, a tapping, the sound of another team's chisels. You've been working for months, chipping away in the darkness. Now, you know you are close. The excitement builds. You work faster, harder. Finally, with a breakthrough swing, a small hole appears. Light. Air. You see the face of a man from the other team peering through. A great cheer goes up. The two tunnels have met, almost perfectly aligned, deep within the heart of the hill. It is a triumph of engineering, of perseverance, and of sheer bloody-minded determination. You have conquered the mountain. After the darkness of the tunnel, you emerge blinking into the sunlight. But the landscape ahead presents a new and even more spectacular challenge. A wide, deep valley. The aqueduct must cross it. And this is where the archers come in. Building an aqueduct bridge, a pons aquae, is the most complex, most expensive and most iconic part of the entire process. It requires immense resources, skilled engineering, and a workforce operating high above the ground. The first step is building the foundations for the great stone piers that will support the arches. If the ground is solid, deep foundations are dug down to bedrock. If the ground is marshy or unstable, Roman engineers employ a remarkable technique. They drive thousands of wooden piles, sharpened logs, often oak or alder, deep into the earth until they hit a solid layer, creating an artificial foundation. You might be part of the team operating the pile driver, a massive human-powered machine that repeatedly lifts and drops a heavy weight onto the pile head. Thump, thump, thump. It is another form of grueling, rhythmic labour. Once the foundations are secure, the great stone piers begin to rise. You are now working with the lapidarii, the skilled stonemasons. The stones, quarried and roughly shaped miles away, arrive by cart. Your job might be to operate the lifting cranes. These are large, complex wooden machines, often powered by treadmills, capable of hoisting multi-ton blocks high into the air. You walk endlessly inside the great wheel, the sun beating down, your world reduced to the rough wood beneath your feet. High above, the masons guide the colossal stones into place, securing them with mortar and iron clamps. Then comes the most critical part, building the arches themselves. This requires the construction of massive wooden centering, a temporary curved wooden framework that will support the stones of the arch until the keystone is placed and the arch becomes self-supporting. The carpenters are the masters here, building these huge, precisely shaped structures. Once the centering is in place, the masons begin laying the wedge-shaped stones of the arch, the voussoirs, working from both sides towards the centre. You might be part of the team mixing and hauling the mortar, or carefully hoisting the precisely cut voussoirs up to the masons working high on the scaffolding. Finally, the keystone, the final central stone at the apex of the arch, is ready to be placed. This is a moment of great tension. As the keystone slides into place, the arch settles, the forces distributing themselves through the stone. The wooden centering is then carefully removed. If the calculations were correct, if the stones were cut perfectly, if the mortar is strong, the arch stands, a miracle of stone and geometry, defying gravity. A cheer goes up from the workers below. Another arch is complete. Only 50 more to go. The aqueduct bridge slowly, majestically, begins to march across the valley, a testament to Roman ambition and the incredible skill of its anonymous builders. While the structure itself is a marvel, the work is fraught with peril. The scaffolding is a rickety, temporary structure, often built with green wood lashed together with rope. It sways in the wind. Planks break. Men fall. Working high above the ground, handling heavy stones and tools, requires constant vigilance. A dropped chisel, A dislodged stone can be lethal to those working below. There are no hard hats, no safety nets. Your only protection is your skill, your awareness, and a healthy dose of luck. The lifting cranes, though ingenious, are also prone to catastrophic failure. Ropes fray and snap. Wooden gears strip and break under the immense strain. A treadmill worker might stumble, causing the wheel to spin out of control. When a multi-ton block falls from a height of 100 feet, the results are devastating. The construction site is a place of constant low-level noise. The chip of chisels, the shouts of foremen, the creak of cranes, but everyone learns to recognize the sharp, sudden crack of breaking wood, or the whistling sound of a falling object, followed by a sickening thud and then a sudden, terrible silence. Disease remains a constant threat in the crowded, unsanitary work camps, but the work itself carries its own occupational hazards. Quarrymen and tunnellers suffer from lung diseases caused by inhaling stone dust. Masons develop arthritis and back problems from years of heavy lifting and awkward postures. Men working with the lime mortar suffer from chemical burns on their hands and arms. It is a physically punishing life that ages men quickly. You look at the older workers, their bodies bent and scarred, and you see your own future. Yet, despite the dangers and the hardships, there is a powerful sense of camaraderie, of shared purpose. You are part of something immense, something permanent. You are building a structure that will serve the city for centuries, a monument to the power and ingenuity of Rome. You develop a fierce pride in your work, in your gang, in your small contribution to this colossal undertaking. You might carve your initials or a small personal mark on a hidden surface of a stone you set, a secret message to the future, a quiet declaration. I was here. I helped build this. It is a dangerous, grueling, and often thankless job, but it is also, in its own way, a profoundly meaningful one. You are not just moving stone, you are moving civilization forward, one heavy block at a time. The aqueduct is finished. After years, perhaps even decades of relentless labour, the final section of the channel is plastered. The last arch is completed. The day arrives for the water to be let in. This is not a grand public ceremony like the opening of a temple or a bathhouse. It is a quiet, technical affair, attended only by the engineers, the foremen, and a few high-ranking officials. The sluice gates at the Caput Aquae, the source spring high in the hills, are opened. You and the other workers stand along the length of the aqueduct, watching, waiting. You can hear it before you see it. A low, distant rumble, growing steadily louder. Then it appears. A surge of clean, clear, cold water, flowing smoothly down the channel you built. It rushes through the tunnels, across the great bridges, contained perfectly by the waterproof plaster you so carefully applied. It is a moment of profound, quiet triumph. The stone river has come alive. The water arrives at the city gates, emptying into a great distribution tank, the Castellum Aquae. From here, it will be channeled through a complex network of lead pipes and smaller conduits to feed the city's public fountains, its bathhouses, and the villas of the wealthy elite. You watch the water pour into the Castellum, a seemingly endless, generous flow. You think of the years of sweat, the injuries, the deaths, the sheer human effort that was required to bring this single, simple necessity to the city. The engineers receive the accolades. The emperor receives the glory, his name inscribed on the monumental arches. You receive your final pay and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. But your life's work is not over. Building the aqueduct is only half the battle. Maintaining it is a constant, ongoing struggle. You are now offered a permanent position, a government job with relative security, You are to become an Aquarius, one of the skilled workers responsible for the upkeep of the aqueduct. It is a less physically demanding job than construction, perhaps, but it carries its own set of challenges and dangers. You accept. Your life is now permanently tied to this river of stone. Your new job is one of constant inspection and repair. You are part of a team responsible for a specific section of the aqueduct. Every day you walk the line, patrolling the structure, looking for problems. You check for leaks in the channel, cracks in the masonry, signs of subsidence in the foundations. You clear away vegetation that might damage the structure. You remove debris, leaves, branches, the occasional unlucky animal that might obstruct the flow of water. You are a guardian, a caretaker, ensuring the continued health of this vital artery. The biggest challenge is the build-up of calcium carbonate, sinter, inside the channel. The hard water flowing from the limestone hills is rich in dissolved minerals. Over time, these minerals precipitate out, forming thick, hard-scale deposits on the walls and floor of the speakers. If left unchecked, this sinter can eventually choke the channel completely, reducing the water flow to a trickle. Periodically, sections of the aqueduct must be shut down, a complex operation involving sluice gates, and the channel must be cleaned. This requires you to go inside. You enter the dark, narrow, damp channel through one of the inspection shafts. The air is cool and smells of wet stone and minerals. You work by the dim light of oil lamps, using hammers and chisels to chip away the rock-hard sinter deposits. It is slow, claustrophobic work, performed in cramped, uncomfortable conditions. Sometimes you find strange things embedded in the sinter, lost tools, coins, even small pieces of jewellery, dropped by workers centuries ago during the initial construction, now fossilised in the man-made rock. You are an archaeologist of plumbing. Working inside the tunnels and channels carries its own risks. Flash floods caused by sudden storms in the hills can send unexpected surges of water down the aqueduct, trapping or drowning workers. Sections of old tunnel can collapse without warning. It is a hidden, dangerous world beneath the ground. A world essential to the life of the city above, but utterly invisible to its inhabitants. You are a member of a silent service, a subterranean guardian, ensuring that the fountains continue to flow and the baths remain full. You're an old man now. Your back aches, your hands are stiff, but your eyes are still sharp. You are the curator, aquarium, the chief inspector for your section of the aqueduct. You no longer chip away sinter yourself. You supervise the younger aquarii. You have spent your entire adult life in the service of this single, immense structure. You know its every curve, its every weakness, its every secret. You have seen emperors come and go, seen the city change, but the water has kept flowing. You stand on one of the great arches, looking out over the landscape. In the distance, you can see the city, its rooftops gleaming in the sun. You know that down there people are bathing, drinking, cooking, living their lives, utterly dependent on the clean, reliable flow of water that you and men like you provide. They likely never give a thought to the source of that water, to the immense structure that carries it, or to the men who built and maintain it. Your work is invisible, taken for granted. There are no triumphal arches built for aqueduct workers. There are no statues in the forum commemorating the men who died in the tunnels. Your reward is simply the quiet, steady, life-giving flow of water itself. You look along the line of the aqueduct, marching across the valley, a symbol of Roman power, yes, but also of Roman pragmatism, of Roman determination. It is a monument built not just of stone and concrete, but of human sweat, human ingenuity, and human endurance. The Roman Aqueduct Worker was the unsung hero of the empire's success. He was the labourer who quarried the stone, the engineer who calculated the gradients, the mason who set the arches, the plasterer who sealed the channel, and the maintenance man who kept the water flowing for centuries. His life was one of hard labour, of constant danger, of low status and little recognition. But without his tireless, often invisible work, the great cities of the Roman world, with their magnificent baths, their public fountains, their sanitation systems, could simply not have existed. He was the man who built the arteries of an empire, ensuring that the lifeblood of civilization could reach its heart. And the majestic ruins of his work, still standing across the landscape of Europe and North Africa, are a silent testament to his skill, his sacrifice, and his enduring legacy. Hey guys, glad you could make it. Tonight, we're journeying back to the High Middle Ages, an era of soaring faith and incredibly slow construction projects. We're here to look at the monumental, multi-generational efforts required to build one of the defining structures of the age, the Great Medieval Cathedral. We see these magnificent stone giants piercing the sky, intricate webs of stained glass and soaring arches, and we imagine them rising effortlessly, guided by divine inspiration. But the brutal reality is that building a cathedral was less a miracle and more an agonizingly slow, crushingly expensive, and lethally dangerous endurance test. It was a 100-year-long construction site, plagued by funding crises, technological limitations, catastrophic accidents, and the simple, inconvenient fact that everyone involved kept dying before the job was done. If these slow explorations of how things really got done in the past help you find a moment of quiet focus in your own life, a simple like or a subscribe is always a wonderful and deeply appreciated signal. And as our community continues to gather from all corners of the map, it's always fascinating to see who is joining us. So please feel free to share where you're listening from as you settle in for the night. Alright, it's time to let the noise of the modern world fade into the distance. Find that perfect, comfortable spot. Let your body relax. Feel the weight of it sink down. And take a slow, deep breath in. And let it all go. Good. The year is 1170. The town is a modest timber and plaster affair in northern France. You are a simple stonemason. And the bishop has just had a very big, very expensive idea. It begins, as most grand medieval projects do, with ambition and a touch of competitive piety. Your town's current cathedral is a sturdy but rather gloomy Romanesque structure built a century ago. It's functional, but frankly, it's a bit embarrassing. The bishop has just returned from a visit to Saint-Denis, near Paris, where Abbot Suger has pioneered a radical new style. A style filled with light, height, and enormous windows of coloured glass. It's called Gothic, and it's the architectural equivalent of a divine revelation. Your bishop, a man of noble birth and considerable ego, looks at his own dark, squat cathedral and decides. He needs an upgrade. He needs something bigger, taller, brighter. He needs a statement. He convenes a meeting of the cathedral chapter, the council of canons who manage the cathedral's affairs, and unveils his grand vision. A new cathedral, one that will soar towards the heavens, its spire the tallest in the region, its windows dazzling the faithful with biblical stories rendered in light. It will be a testament to the glory of God, the power of the church, and, not incidentally, the importance of your bishop. The canons, initially sceptical about the cost, are eventually swept up in the bishop's enthusiasm, or perhaps just intimidated by his authority. The decision is made. The old cathedral will be torn down, and a new one will rise in its place. The announcement is made to the townspeople during High Mass. It is presented as a sacred duty, a communal project that will bring divine favour and pilgrims' money to the town. There is excitement, yes, but also a quiet sense of dread. Everyone knows what this means. It means decades, probably generations, of disruption. It means higher taxes. It means their sons and grandsons will likely be conscripted for labour. Building a cathedral is not a quick renovation. It is a geological event, a slow-motion earthquake that will reshape the town's economy, its skyline, and the lives of everyone in it for the next 100 years. You, a humble stonemason, hear the news with mixed feelings. It means work, decades of guaranteed work, a rare security in your uncertain world. But you also know the risks, working high on the scaffolding, handling colossal blocks of stone. It's a dangerous trade. You have seen men fall. You have seen walls collapse. You look at your own young son, barely old enough to hold a mallet. Will he be the one to finally set the capstone on this great work? Or will his son? The bishop dreams of a finished masterpiece. You just hope to survive the construction process. The first phase isn't glorious carving or soaring vaults. It's demolition. The old must make way for the new, a slow, dusty, and dangerous process in itself. Before a single stone of the new cathedral can be laid, the most crucial and most agonizing part of the project must begin. Fundraising. Building a mountain of carved stone and glass is not cheap. The bishop's vision requires a river of gold, and that river must be sourced, primarily, from the pockets of the faithful and the fearful. Your town is not wealthy. It's a market town, moderately prosperous, but the scale of this project dwarfs its resources. The bishop and the cathedral chapter must launch a multi-pronged and often morally ambiguous campaign to finance the faith. The first and most reliable source of income is the cathedral's own property. The church is a massive landowner, holding vast tracts of agricultural land, forests, and even mills around your town. Rents and tithes, a mandatory 10% tax on all produce, provide a steady baseline income. But this is nowhere near enough. The bishop institutes a series of new ecclesiastical taxes. Every baptism, every marriage, every funeral now comes with an additional cathedral levy. It's divine service with a surcharge. Resentment simmers among the townspeople, but who is going to argue with God's representative on earth, especially when he holds the keys to heaven? Then comes the relic trade. Your cathedral happens to possess a minor but locally revered relic, the finger bone of a rather obscure saint. Suddenly, this dusty old bone becomes the centerpiece of a major marketing campaign. The bishop declares a series of feast days in honor of the saint. Miraculous cures are reported. A blind woman regains her sight after touching the reliquary. A lame man walks. Pilgrims begin to arrive, drawn by the hope of divine intervention. They leave offerings, small coins, wax candles, sometimes even a chicken or a pig, at the saint's shrine. The cathedral becomes a spiritual tourist destination, and the finger bone starts generating more revenue than the town's entire wool market. It's a slightly morbid form of crowdfunding. But even relics and rents aren't enough. The bishop must appeal to the wealthy. He embarks on a fundraising tour of the local nobility. He visits Baron von Hesse, whose vast estates lie to the north. The baron is known more for his love of hunting than for his piety, but the bishop knows his leverage. He offers the Baron a prominent place for his family tomb within the new cathedral's crypt, and perhaps a stained glass window depicting the Baron kneeling piously at the feet of Christ, a subtle but effective form of eternal advertising. The Baron, concerned with his legacy and perhaps his immortal soul, makes a substantial donation. Similar negotiations take place with wealthy merchants and guild masters in the town, each offered a slice of sacred real estate or a flattering portrayal in stone or glass in return for their gold. Perhaps the most potent fundraising tool is the sale of indulgences. The bishop receives permission from the Pope to offer remission of sins in exchange for contributions to the cathedral building fund. Travelling preachers are sent out to the surrounding villages. They paint terrifying pictures of the torments of hell and the agonies of purgatory. But then they offer a solution. Contribute to the glorious work of building God's house on earth, and you can buy yourself or your deceased loved ones a little less time sizzling in the afterlife. It is a powerful and deeply cynical appeal to fear and hope. Peasants who can barely afford bread give up their last few pennies, hoping to ease the suffering of a dead parent. The ethics are questionable, but the results are undeniable. The coffers begin to fill, slowly, painfully, drop by precious drop. With a precarious stream of funding secured, the next crucial step is finding the man who can turn the bishop's dream into a reality of stone and mortar. This is the master mason. He is not just a foreman, he is the architect, the engineer, the project manager, and the chief artist, all rolled into one. Finding a man with the skill and experience to design and oversee the construction of a great Gothic cathedral is not easy. These men are rare, highly sought after international superstars of the medieval building world. Your bishop sends out letters, leveraging his network of ecclesiastical contacts. Finally, after months of searching, a master arrives. Master Gerard. Master Gerard is a man of about 50, his face lined with the sun and the concentration of his craft. He arrives not with blueprints. Detailed architectural drawings don't really exist yet, but with a small collection of wooden templates, a measuring rod marked with complex divisions, and a head full of geometry and practical experience. He doesn't speak the local dialect well, having worked on cathedrals across France and into the German lands. Communication will be interesting. His first task is to translate the bishop's vague desires for light and height into a workable plan. He spends weeks surveying the site, studying the ground, assessing the ruins of the old Romanesque structure that must be demolished and its foundations reused or replaced. He begins to sketch, not on paper, but by scratching designs into a large smoothed bed of plaster, laid out on the floor of a temporary workshop, the tracing floor. This is where the cathedral is truly designed. He uses a compass and straight edge to lay out the great geometric forms, the pointed arches, the ribbed vaults, the complex shapes of the window tracery. His understanding of geometry is profound, intuitive, learned through a lifetime of practice, not theory. He understands how the immense forces of tons of stone will flow through the structure, how the outward thrust of the vaults must be countered by the elegant external arms of the flying buttresses. He begins to carve wooden templates for every key stone, the voussoirs of the arches, the ribs of the vaults, the mullions of the windows. These templates are the core of his communication system. They will be used by the quarrymen to rough out the stones, and by the masons on site to carve the stones to their final, precise shape. It is a system of extraordinary complexity, relying on shared understanding and absolute precision. A mistake in a single template can be multiplied hundreds of times across the building, leading to structural instability or aesthetic disaster. It's like writing the DNA code for a stone behemoth. Master Gerard also begins to assemble his team. He brings with him a small core of trusted journeymen, masons and sculptors, but the vast majority of the workforce must be recruited locally. You, as a skilled stonemason, are summoned. Master Gerard inspects your tools, asks you to carve a simple pattern. He watches your hands, your posture, the way you read the stone. He nods. You are hired. You are now part of his loge, his workshop. You will spend the next decades of your life translating his geometric vision, communicated through wooden templates, into the physical reality of carved stone. The master mason is the mind. You are the hands. The cathedral will consume a mountain's worth of stone, tens of thousands of tons of it, and it cannot be just any stone. It must be high quality, fine-grained limestone, free of cracks and impurities, capable of being carved into intricate shapes and strong enough to bear immense weight. Master Gerard, using his knowledge of geology, another essential skill for a master mason, identifies a suitable quarry site several miles upriver from your town, and so begins one of the most brutal, dangerous and logistically complex operations of the entire project: quarrying and transporting the stone. You are temporarily reassigned to the quarry. Life here is even harsher than on the main construction site. You live in a crude camp of wooden huts. Your world is a great open wound in the earth, a landscape of raw stone, dust and relentless back-breaking labour. Your job is to extract the stone. You work in teams, using iron picks and wedges to exploit the natural bedding planes of the limestone. You drive rows of iron wedges into a fissure, hammering them in sequence. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoes off the quarry walls. You listen for the change in pitch, the groan that signals the stone is beginning to yield. Finally, with a great tearing sound, a huge multi-ton block detaches from the quarry face. But it is still just a rough chunk of rock. It must be roughly shaped, or scabbled, before it can be transported. Using heavy stone hammers and pointed chisels, you begin the arduous task of knocking off the roughest edges, squaring the block into a manageable, though still enormous, cube. The air is thick with stone dust that clogs your lungs and makes your eyes water. Flying shards of stone are a constant danger. You have seen men blinded by a misplaced hammer blow. Safety regulations are minimal. A quick prayer before starting work is about the extent of it. Then comes the transport. Moving a 5-ton block of limestone several miles overland and across a river in the 12th century is a monumental challenge. The blocks are levered onto massive, heavy-duty wooden carts, often with solid wooden wheels. Teams of oxen, sometimes a dozen or more, are yoked to the carts. You become a teamster, urging the straining animals forward, your whip cracking in the air. The journey is agonizingly slow. The carts move at a walking pace, maybe less. The unpaved track becomes a rutted quagmire in the rain. Wheels break, axles snap, animals collapse from exhaustion. Reaching the river is only half the battle. The blocks must be loaded onto sturdy, flat-bottomed barges. This is done using immense wooden cranes, powered by human treadmills, great wooden wheels that men walk inside like giant hamster wheels. It is exhausting, repetitive, and incredibly dangerous work. A snapped rope, a failed gear, can send a stone block plummeting, crushing anyone below. Once loaded, the barge begins its slow journey downriver to the town, poled or sailed if the wind is right. You watch it go, a single precious block of stone, representing weeks of labour and risk, floating slowly towards its destiny. And then you turn back to the quarry face. There are thousands more where that came from. Back at the cathedral site, the raw, scabbled blocks from the quarry begin to arrive. Now, the true artistry of the stonemason begins. You work in a temporary lodge built against the rising walls of the cathedral, a noisy, dusty workshop filled with the constant chip, chip, chip of hammers and chisels. You are given a rough block and a wooden template from Master Gerard. Your job is to transform the crude stone into a perfectly shaped voussoir for a pointed arch, or a complex curved section for a vault rib. You are not just a labourer, you are a skilled craftsman. You have spent years learning your trade, progressing from apprentice to journeyman. You know how to read the grain of the stone, how to anticipate its weaknesses. You have your own set of tools. Heavy iron mallets for rough work, lighter wooden ones for finishing, and a collection of chisels with different shapes and edges, each kept razor sharp. You work with a focused, quiet intensity. You are not following a blueprint. You are following the shape of the template, transferring its geometry onto the stone with calipers and a marking awl. Then you begin to cut. Each blow of your mallet must be precise, controlled. Remove too much stone and the block is ruined. Leave too much and it will not fit. The work is physically demanding. You are on your feet all day, swinging a heavy mallet, your body covered in a fine white dust. Your hands are rough, calloused and often cut. And then there is the danger of silicosis, the mason's disease. A slow, debilitating lung condition caused by years of inhaling stone dust. You cough often, a dry hacking cough that doesn't seem to clear. But there is a deep pride in this work. You are shaping the very bones of God's house. Each stone you carve is a prayer, a testament to your skill. You mark each finished stone with your personal symbol, your mason's mark, a simple geometric sign that identifies your work. It is your signature, your small claim to immortality in this vast anonymous project. Meanwhile, high above you, another, even more dangerous ballet is taking place. The walls of the cathedral are rising, and with them, the scaffolding. This is not the neat metal scaffolding of the modern world. It is a terrifying, precarious web of wooden poles lashed together with rope, erected by specialist carpenters. Upon this flimsy structure, the setters, the masons who work high up, fitting the carved stones into place, perform their perilous work. They are the elite, the daredevils of the construction site. Getting the stones up to them is a major operation. Immense lifting machines, powered by human treadmills or large windlasses, slowly hoist the multi-ton blocks one at a time. You might be assigned to the treadmill, walking endlessly inside a giant wooden wheel, your world reduced to the rough planks beneath your feet and the burning in your thighs. Or you might be part of the team on the ground, guiding the ropes, shouting warnings. Or you might be one of the setters, balanced precariously 100 feet in the air, guiding a colossal stone block into position with levers and wooden shims, while the wind tries to tear you from your perch. Falls are frequent and almost always fatal. The base of the rising walls is a place of constant low-level dread. Every man knows someone who has fallen. Every man knows that his next step could be his last. The cathedral rises towards heaven, but its construction is a constant reminder of mortal fragility. While you and the other masons toil with the stone, other teams of specialized craftsmen are at work, each adding their own layer of complexity and beauty to the emerging structure. In a vast, separate workshop, the carpenters are performing miracles with wood. They are not just building scaffolding, they are constructing the immense, complex timber framework that will form the cathedral's roof, high above the stone vaults. This requires enormous beams of oak, often sourced from forests hundreds of miles away, and floated downriver. The master carpenter is a genius in his own right, a man who understands the intricate geometry of trusses and joints needed to span the vast width of the nave and support the heavy lead sheeting that will cover the roof. He creates another set of wooden templates, another silent language of shapes and angles. His men work with axes, adzes, and sophisticated hand drills, shaping the massive timbers, cutting complex mortise and tenon joints that fit together like puzzle pieces, locked in place with wooden pegs. Raising this colossal wooden skeleton into place, hundreds of feet above the ground, will be another feat of terrifying high-altitude engineering, relying on ropes, pulleys, and raw human muscle. Elsewhere, in a workshop filled with the roar of furnaces and the smell of molten sand, the glaziers are creating the cathedral's soul, the stained glass windows. This is an art form that has reached its zenith in the Gothic era. The master glazier is part artist, part chemist, part engineer. He begins by creating a full-size drawing of the window, the cartoon, on a whitewashed wooden board. He then selects his coloured glass. This is not made locally. It is imported at great expense, often from Venice or the Rhineland. The colours are created by adding metallic oxides to the molten glass, cobalt for blue, copper for red, manganese for purple. He cuts the small pieces of coloured glass according to his cartoon, using a heated iron rod to score the glass and then snapping it along the line. It is a precise and unforgiving process. He then lays these pieces out on his cartoon, like assembling a giant, luminous jigsaw puzzle. The pieces are held together by strips of lead, called cames, which have an H-shaped cross-section. He solders the lead joints together. Finally, he uses a dark, opaque paint made from ground copper and iron oxides, mixed with wine or urine, to paint the details onto the glass. The faces of saints, the folds of robes, the inscriptions. This paint is then fired in a kiln, fusing it permanently to the glass. The finished window, when lifted into place in the great stone openings of the cathedral walls, will transform the harsh sunlight into a dazzling, ethereal, and deeply spiritual wash of coloured light. It is an art form designed to transport the worshipper from the mundane world into the realm of the divine. The work proceeds agonizingly slowly, season after season, year after year. But progress is not linear. Building a cathedral is a constant battle against unforeseen disasters and the simple, grinding realities of the medieval world. One winter, an exceptionally harsh frost causes the mortar in a newly completed section of the vaulting to fail. With a terrifying groan, a huge section of the stone ceiling collapses, killing 3 masons and setting the project back by years. Master Gerard, his reputation damaged, is quietly replaced by a younger master with new ideas. The plans are subtly altered. The design evolves. A fire breaks out in the carpenter's workshop. A stray spark from a forge ignites a pile of wood shavings. The blaze spreads with terrifying speed, consuming the precious stockpiled timbers for the roof and destroying years' worth of templates. The project grinds to a halt for months while new timber is sourced and new templates are painstakingly recreated. The cost is immense, both in time and in money. The bishop is forced to launch another fundraising campaign, selling more indulgences, begging for more donations. The enthusiasm of the townspeople, once so high, begins to wane. The half-finished cathedral starts to look less like a symbol of civic pride and more like a permanent, costly, and dangerous ruin. Then comes the war. Your region is caught in the middle of a dynastic squabble between two powerful dukes. Armies march across the land. The quarry is shut down. Workers are conscripted into the duke's army. Funds are diverted to the war effort. For 5 years the construction site falls silent. Grass grows between the stones. Birds nest in the half-finished arches. When peace finally returns, a generation of skilled craftsmen has been lost. New workers must be trained. Momentum must be regained. The great project stumbles, but it does not die. And then, the ultimate catastrophe. The Black Death sweeps across Europe. It arrives at your town like an invisible silent tide. People fall sick with terrifying speed, their bodies covered in black boils, their lungs filling with fluid. Within weeks, nearly half the population is dead. The construction site is abandoned. Master craftsmen die alongside common labourers. The bishop, who had preached that the cathedral would bring divine favour, dies in his palace. The project is not just halted, it feels cursed. For a decade, the great stone skeleton stands silent and empty, a monument not to faith, but to human fragility in the face of forces beyond its control. It seems as though the great work will never be finished. You are an old man now. Your hands are gnarled with arthritis. Your cough is a constant companion. You are the master mason. Master Gerard, your first teacher, is long dead. So is his successor. You are the third master to oversee this project. You were that young apprentice, all those years ago, watching the bishop unveil his dream. You have spent your entire life, nearly 60 years, working on this single building. You have seen friends die in falls, colleagues succumb to the mason's disease, an entire generation wiped out by the plague. You have seen funding dry up, plans change, wars halt progress. Yet you have endured, and so has the cathedral. Slowly, painstakingly, work resumed after the plague. A new bishop, more pragmatic than the first, secured new funding. A new generation of craftsmen was trained, and under your quiet, steady guidance, the great structure has finally reached its completion. The last timbers of the roof are in place, covered in their protective skin of lead. The final glorious stained glass window, depicting the Last Judgment, has been installed in the west facade. The stone carvers have finished the intricate sculptures that adorn the portals, a gallery of saints and gargoyles staring out over the town. Today is the day of consecration. 100 years after the first stone was laid, the cathedral is finally ready to be dedicated to God. A magnificent procession, led by the Archbishop himself, enters the vast, echoing space. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the sound of triumphant plainsong chant. Light streams through the colossal stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in shifting patterns of ruby, sapphire, and gold. It is breathtaking. It is a space unlike any other on earth, a space designed to lift the human spirit, to make you feel small and yet connected to something immense and eternal. You stand at the back of the nave, leaning heavily on your walking stick, watching the ceremony. You are too old, too infirm, to join the procession. You look up at the soaring vaults, the intricate web of stone ribs that you helped to build, that you understand better than any man alive. You see the light, the height, the beauty, but you also see the ghosts. You see the faces of the men who died here. You feel the echo of the hammers, the grinding of the lifting machines, the sting of the stone dust in your lungs. You know the true cost of this magnificence. It was paid in sweat, in blood, in time, the irreplaceable time of thousands of human lives. Your life. You are not listed in the cathedral's chronicle. Your name is not carved above the door, but you know that your soul, and the souls of all the nameless men who toiled alongside you are woven into the very fabric of this building. You have built a house for God, and in doing so, you have built your own anonymous monument. The secrets of Cleopatra's palace in Egypt. We're embarking on a voyage across the shimmering Mediterranean to the legendary city of Alexandria, the jewel of the Nile Delta. We're seeking entry into one of the most famous and most mysterious royal residences in history, the Palace of Cleopatra. We have this glittering image from movies and legends, a place of unimaginable luxury, perfumed baths, secret romances, and a queen of intoxicating beauty ruling effortlessly over a devoted kingdom. But the brutal reality is that Cleopatra's palace was less a pleasure dome and more the high-stakes headquarters of a nation fighting for its survival. It was a labyrinth of deadly political intrigue, crushing bureaucracy, constant fear of assassination, and a place where the Queen's every smile, every word, was a calculated move in a desperate game against Rome. If you've stayed with me through this first story, I'm glad it's brought you a moment of peace. If you'd like to help this little community of ours keep growing, a simple like or subscribe is always appreciated. And I'd still love to know where you're listening from. It's been wonderful seeing voices from all over the world join in. Your first impression is one of overwhelming, blinding whiteness and the salty tang of the sea. Alexandria is not the ancient mud brick Egypt of the pharaohs further up the Nile. It is a Greek city, a masterpiece of Hellenistic urban planning founded by Alexander the Great himself. You stand in the Brucheion, the royal quarter, a vast complex of palaces, temples, gardens, and administrative buildings that occupies nearly a third of the entire city, walled off and overlooking the magnificent Great Harbour. The buildings are faced with gleaming white marble and limestone, reflecting the fierce Mediterranean sun. Colonnaded walkways offer shaded respite, fountains splash in cool courtyards, and the air hums with the energy of 1,000 people attending to the business of a kingdom. But beneath the surface beauty, there is an undeniable tension. Heavily armed guards, Macedonian and Gallic mercenaries, their armour glinting, stand at every gateway, their eyes watchful and suspicious. You see officials hurrying through the courtyards, their faces drawn and anxious, clutching papyrus scrolls like shields. Whispers follow you. Whispers in Greek, the language of the court, but also in Egyptian, the language of the vast majority of the population who live outside these privileged walls. You quickly learn that the city, and the palace itself, is simmering with factional strife. The young Queen Cleopatra VII is locked in a bitter civil war with her even younger brother and co-ruler, Ptolemy XIII. The palace is divided. Every conversation is potentially dangerous. Every stranger is a potential spy. Your letter of introduction, painstakingly written by your teacher back home, gets you through the first gate. You are directed towards the administrative heart of the complex, a maze of offices where the real work of running Egypt happens. The scale is staggering. You pass storerooms piled high with sacks of grain. Egypt is the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, and control of the grain supply is the foundation of Ptolemaic power. You see chambers filled with clerks, hundreds of them sitting cross-legged, endlessly scratching onto papyrus scrolls with their reed pens. The air is thick with the dry, dusty smell of old papyrus and the faint, sharp scent of ink. You are assigned to a junior position in the royal secretariat under the supervision of a senior scribe named Apollonius. He is a Greek, like most of the administrators, his face weary, his fingers permanently stained with ink. Your job is profoundly unglamorous. You are a human copying machine. Your first task is to make multiple copies of a new tax decree regarding the levy on vineyards. You are given a master scroll and a stack of fresh papyrus. You find a space on the floor in a crowded room, dip your pen in the pot of black ink, and begin the painstaking process of transcription. It's the ancient world's equivalent of being sent to the photocopier, except the photocopier is you, and it takes 8 hours per copy. The work is mind-numbing, but through it, you begin to understand the true nature of Cleopatra's power. It is not just derived from her divine status as a pharaoh, or her famous charm. It is built on this mountain of paperwork. Every bushel of wheat harvested, every jar of oil produced, every bolt of linen woven, every tax collected, every legal judgment rendered. It is all recorded, tracked, and managed by this vast, complex bureaucracy. The palace is not just a residence, it is the central processing unit of the entire Egyptian economy and legal system. Cleopatra rules because she controls the information. She controls the records. She controls the scribes. You learn that the administration is a strange, hybrid creature. The language of government is Greek. The senior officials are almost exclusively Greek or Macedonian, descendants of Alexander's generals who inherited Egypt 3 centuries ago. But the system they manage is deeply Egyptian. The tax codes, the land ownership laws, the religious structures, these are ancient pharaonic institutions that the Ptolemies simply adapted for their own use. You see Egyptian priests working alongside Greek accountants, translating decrees, mediating disputes. It is a complex, sometimes awkward fusion of 2 cultures, held together by the sheer force of bureaucratic necessity. Your days fall into a monotonous rhythm. Wake before dawn in the crowded scribal barracks, a simple meal of bread and beer. Hours spent hunched over a papyrus scroll, the scratch, scratch, scratch of your pen, the only sound in a room full of silent, focused men. Another simple meal. More copying. Then, finally, release, as the sun begins to set. You're a tiny, insignificant cog in a vast, impersonal machine. You rarely see the Queen herself, perhaps only glimpsing her gilded litter passing through a distant courtyard. You hear the rumours, the whispers of her beauty, her intelligence, her ruthlessness. But your reality is far removed from the legends. Your reality is ink stains, aching fingers, and the constant dry rustle of official documents. One day, the routine is broken. A wave of hushed excitement, mixed with fear, ripples through the administrative offices. A foreign dignitary is arriving. Not just any dignitary. It is Gaius Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, fresh from his victory over Pompey at Pharsalus. He is coming to Alexandria, ostensibly to mediate the civil war between Cleopatra and her brother. But everyone knows he is here to exert Roman influence, perhaps even to annex Egypt outright. The palace shifts into high gear. Preparations are frantic. Guest apartments must be readied. Banquets must be planned. Security must be tripled. You are caught up in the whirlwind. Your section is tasked with preparing briefing documents for the Queen, summaries of Egypt's grain exports to Rome, records of treaties, genealogies proving Cleopatra's legitimate claim to the throne over her brothers. You work late into the night, your hand cramping, your eyes burning from the flickering oil lamps. The sheer volume of information required is staggering. Cleopatra is preparing not just to meet Caesar, but to negotiate with him, to outwit him. You realize her power lies not just in her lineage or her army, but in her mastery of this information, her ability to deploy facts and figures like weapons. Then comes the moment that will pass into legend. Caesar is established in the palace, surrounded by his legionaries, effectively controlling the royal quarter. The young King Ptolemy the 13th and his advisors are with him. Cleopatra is outside the city, seemingly checkmated, but she is nothing if not resourceful. The story will be told for centuries, how she had herself smuggled back into the palace, past her brother's guards and the Roman sentries, rolled up inside a carpet or a bed sack, carried on the shoulders of her loyal servant Apollodorus, the Sicilian. You don't witness this directly, of course, but you hear the whispers the next morning. You see the stunned faces of Ptolemy's advisors. You see the wry, knowing smiles on the faces of Cleopatra's supporters. And later that day, you see her, Cleopatra the 7th, Queen of Egypt, walking through the palace courtyard, not as a fugitive, but as the confident hostess, accompanied by Caesar himself. She is younger than you expected, barely 21. She is not perhaps the overwhelming, otherworldly beauty of later legend, but her presence is magnetic. Her eyes are intelligent, alive with a quick, assessing energy. She moves with a feline grace, and she speaks Greek with a fluency and wit that clearly captivates the Roman general. You have just witnessed one of the most audacious and successful political maneuvers in history, executed with nothing more than courage, cunning, and unconventional shipping methods. Your proximity to the administrative heart of the palace gives you occasional glimpses into another world, a world of quiet scholarship that exists side by side with the ruthless political games. Adjacent to the palace complex, connected by covered walkways, is the legendary Mausion, the Temple of the Muses, and its even more famous daughter institution, the Great Library of Alexandria. This is not just a library. It is the intellectual centre of the entire Hellenistic world, a university, a research institute, and a repository of knowledge on an unprecedented scale. Sometimes your duties require you to deliver documents to the Mausion. You walk through cool, quiet halls lined with statues of Greek philosophers. You see scholars from across the known world, Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, engaged in quiet debate or bent over scrolls in reading rooms. The atmosphere is hushed, reverent, a stark contrast to the anxious energy of the palace administration. You catch glimpses of the library itself, vast halls lined with thousands upon thousands of papyrus scrolls, neatly labelled and stacked in pigeonholes. Estimates vary, but it likely held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the sum total of ancient knowledge in literature, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and more. Cleopatra, like her Ptolemaic ancestors, is a patron of this great institution. She is not just a politician, she is a scholar. She speaks multiple languages, perhaps as many as 9, including, uniquely for her dynasty, the native Egyptian language of her subjects. You hear that she spends time in the Mausion, consulting with scholars, reading the ancient texts herself. Her intelligence is not just political cunning. It is a deep, genuine intellectual curiosity. This adds another layer to her complex persona. She is fighting for her throne, yes, but she is also the inheritor and guardian of a profound intellectual tradition. However, even this sanctuary of knowledge is not immune to the palace's dangers. During the Alexandrian War, the conflict that erupts between Caesar's forces and those loyal to Ptolemy the 13th, parts of the library are accidentally burned. You see the smoke rising over the city, and a palpable sense of horror spreads through the scribal community. The loss of even a portion of this irreplaceable collection is a tragedy beyond measure. It is a brutal reminder that in this world knowledge is fragile, easily consumed by the fires of political ambition. The palace is a centre of learning, but it is also a battlefield, and the casualties are not always human. Your position as a minor scribe grants you access, albeit limited, to the outer edges of the palace's inner life. You learn that Cleopatra's residence is not a single building, but a complex of interconnected palaces, villas, and gardens within the royal quarter. There is the Lochius Palace, jutting out into the harbour, offering cool sea breezes. There is the palace on the island of Antirodos, a private retreat accessible only by boat. Life within these private spaces is governed by strict protocols and an ever-present concern for security. Every meal the Queen eats is prepared in dedicated royal kitchens and tasted by professional food tasters to guard against poison. A constant fear in the Ptolemaic dynasty, where sibling rivalry often turned murderous. Her movements are always accompanied by her loyal bodyguards, often fierce Gallic or Germanic mercenaries who owe their loyalty only to her, not to the shifting factions of the court. Even her bedchamber is a fortress, guarded day and night by her most trusted attendants, including loyal eunuchs who manage her private household. You see the evidence of her daily routine in the documents you copy: schedules for audiences, lists of appointments, requisitions for supplies for the royal household, perfumes from Arabia, fine linens, exotic animals for the palace zoo, wine from Greece. It is a life of immense luxury, yes, but also one of rigid structure. Every hour is accounted for. Every interaction is potentially political. Even her famous banquets, legendary for their extravagance, are carefully orchestrated diplomatic events designed to impress and influence visiting dignitaries. It's like being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but with the added pressures of divine status, constant threats of assassination, and a deeply dysfunctional family. And then there's the matter of her famous romances, with Caesar and later with Mark Antony. From your lowly position, you see only the official side of these relationships. You see the Roman generals treated with the highest honours in the palace. You copy the decrees that grant them titles and estates. You hear the gossip, of course, the whispers about the Queen's captivating charm, her political acumen disguised as romantic allure. But the reality you glimpse is less about passion and more about power. These relationships are strategic alliances. Cleopatra needs Rome's military might to secure her throne. Caesar and Antony need Egypt's vast wealth and grain supply to fuel their own ambitions. Love may or may not be involved, but survival certainly is. Her palace is not a stage for romance. It is a chessboard where the game is for the fate of kingdoms, and the Queen is the most skilled player. The palace is beautiful, but it is built on a foundation of skeletons. The Ptolemaic dynasty, from its very beginning, has been plagued by vicious internal conflict. Sibling rivalry is not just a matter of arguments over inheritance. It is a matter of life and death. Cleopatra herself came to power only after a civil war with her brother, Ptolemy XIII, and he was not her only problematic sibling. Her younger sister, Arsinoe IV, also contested the throne and was a constant thorn in Cleopatra's side, eventually being exiled and later executed on Antony's orders, likely at Cleopatra's quiet suggestion. You, as a scribe in the palace, are acutely aware of this undercurrent of familial violence. It permeates the atmosphere. You learn to read the subtle signs of shifting loyalties. An official who was once in favour is suddenly absent from court. A military commander is quietly reassigned to a remote outpost. Whispers circulate about poisonings, about convenient accidents. There are no public trials, no official announcements. people simply disappear. The palace walls, covered in serene depictions of Egyptian gods and Greek myths, have witnessed centuries of fratricide, sororicide, and every other imaginable form of dynastic betrayal. This constant state of internal warfare shapes every aspect of palace life. Trust is a rare and dangerous commodity. Every faction has its spies. Eunuchs, seemingly loyal servants, often act as informants for rival claimants to the throne. Even the royal children are pawns in these deadly games. Cleopatra's own son by Caesar, Caesarion, is both her beloved heir and a potential future target for Roman rivals. Her children by Antony are symbols of her alliance with him, but also liabilities should that alliance fail. You learn to keep your head down, to do your work, to remain invisible. To be noticed, to be seen as taking sides, is to invite disaster. You stick to your papyrus, perfecting your calligraphy, making yourself useful but unremarkable. You see ambitious young courtiers try to play the game, attaching themselves to a rising star, only to be swept away when that star falls. The palace is a beautiful, glittering machine, but its gears are lubricated with blood. It's the ultimate high-stakes workplace environment where office politics can lead directly to your untimely demise, and HR is conspicuously absent. The arrival of Mark Antony in Alexandria marks a new, even more dramatic chapter in the palace's history. If Caesar was the calculating politician, Antony is the charismatic, larger-than-life soldier. His presence electrifies the city and the court. The alliance between Cleopatra and Antony is both a passionate romance and a shrewd political partnership. Together, they dream of ruling the Eastern Mediterranean, a revived Hellenistic empire with Alexandria as its capital, rivaling Rome itself. The palace becomes the stage for this grand and ultimately doomed ambition. Life in the palace takes on a new, almost frantic energy. There are endless banquets, legendary for their opulence, nights filled with music, dancing, rivers of wine, and exotic entertainments. Antony, a man known for his love of pleasure, revels in the luxury of the Ptolemaic court. Cleopatra, ever the skillful diplomat, uses this atmosphere to solidify their bond and to project an image of immense power and wealth to the world. You, in the scriptorium, are busier than ever, drafting decrees for the donations of Alexandria, where Antony grants vast territories to Cleopatra and her children, a move that infuriates Rome. You copy letters between Cleopatra and Antony, letters that mix terms of endearment with hard-nosed political calculations. You see the lists of supplies being gathered for their joint military campaigns, grain, ships, weapons. The palace is no longer just the administrative centre of Egypt. It is the command centre for a burgeoning Eastern Empire, a direct challenge to the growing power of Octavian in Rome. The atmosphere is intoxicating, filled with a sense of grand destiny. It feels as though Alexandria, under its queen and her Roman consort, is on the verge of eclipsing Rome itself. But beneath the glittering surface, the old dangers remain. The cost of Antony's presence and of their shared imperial ambitions is immense. Taxes are raised, resources are strained, and the relationship with Rome becomes increasingly hostile. Octavian, Caesar's pragmatic and ruthless heir, launches a propaganda war against Antony and Cleopatra, portraying them as decadent Oriental despots, a threat to Roman values. The whispers in the palace corridors take on a new, more fearful tone. War is coming. A final, decisive confrontation with Rome. You feel the change in the palace's rhythm. The banquets become less frequent. The meetings are longer, more serious. More soldiers fill the courtyards. Cleopatra, though maintaining her public composure, seems more focused, more driven. The intellectual life of the Mausian seems a distant memory. The palace is now on a war footing. The secrets it holds are no longer just about dynastic succession. They are about military strategy, troop movements, alliances. The glittering headquarters is transforming into a besieged fortress. The dream of a new Eastern Empire is about to collide with the brutal reality of Roman military supremacy. The final act begins. The Battle of Actium. News arrives at the palace, carried by swift messenger ships. It is disastrous. The combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra has been utterly defeated by Octavian's navy. Antony and Cleopatra manage to escape, returning to Alexandria, but the dream is shattered. The atmosphere in the palace becomes one of suffocating dread. The bustling courtyards fall quiet. Officials speak in hushed tones, their faces grim. Many quietly begin to switch their allegiance, sending secret messages to Octavian, hoping to save themselves. Loyalty is a luxury few can now afford. Cleopatra, even in defeat, remains defiant. She tries to negotiate with Octavian, tries to secure the throne for her son Caesarion, but Octavian is implacable. He wants Egypt. He wants Cleopatra, alive, to parade in his triumph through the streets of Rome. You, in the scriptorium, are now tasked with a grim duty, copying the Queen's final letters. Messages to Antony, full of despair and a strange, lingering affection. Instructions to her treasurers, ordering the concealment of certain valuables. And finally, her last will and testament. The palace, once a symbol of vibrant life and power, becomes a house of death. Antony, believing a false report of Cleopatra's death, takes his own life. Cleopatra, heartbroken and facing the ultimate humiliation of being paraded as a captive, chooses her own end. The exact details will forever be debated. The asp, the poisoned hairpin. But the result is the same. The last pharaoh of Egypt, the brilliant, ruthless, captivating queen, who held the fate of the world in her hands, is dead. Roman soldiers swarm the palace. There is no great battle, only a quiet, grim occupation. Octavian enters the palace, not as a guest, but as a conqueror. He views Cleopatra's body, perhaps admiring her courage, perhaps just satisfying his curiosity. He orders the execution of Caesarion, eliminating the last potential rival with Caesar's blood. Egypt is declared a Roman province. The Ptolemaic dynasty is extinguished. The palace, the glittering centre of Hellenistic power for 3 centuries, falls silent. Its treasures are catalogued and shipped off to Rome. Its administration is dismantled, replaced by Roman bureaucrats. You, the humble scribe, are now just another minor functionary in a provincial outpost of a new empire. You walk through the now quiet corridors of the palace. The mercenaries are gone, replaced by stern Roman legionaries. The Greek officials are being replaced by Romans. The scent of exotic perfumes is fading, replaced by the smell of Roman efficiency. The great library still stands, though diminished, its future uncertain under new management. The palace that was the stage for so much drama, so much ambition, so much life and death, feels like an empty theatre after the final curtain. The secrets of Cleopatra's palace were not just hidden passages or scandalous love affairs. They were the secrets of power itself, the complex machinery of bureaucracy, the ruthless calculus of dynastic survival, the delicate art of diplomacy in the face of overwhelming force, the fragile relationship between knowledge and power. It was a place where immense wealth and profound intellect lived side by side with constant fear and brutal political reality. Cleopatra's palace was the dazzling, beating heart of the last great Hellenistic kingdom, a beacon of culture and a cauldron of intrigue. But it was also a fortress besieged, a dynasty consuming itself from within, fighting a losing battle against the inexorable tide of Roman expansion. Its ultimate secret was perhaps the oldest one of all, that even the most brilliant, the most powerful, the most captivating rulers are, in the end, subject to the relentless, unforgiving forces of history. And eventually, the house always wins, especially when that house is Rome. The role of the Shogun in feudal Japan. We're journeying across the sea to the land of the rising sun, to the era of samurai warriors and feudal lords. We're not seeking the serene beauty of a Zen garden or the refined elegance of the imperial court. Instead, we're entering the stark, pragmatic world of the man who held the real power, the shogun. We have this image, often from movies, of the shogun as a supreme, almost godlike military dictator, ruling Japan with unquestioned authority and an army of loyal samurai. But the brutal reality is that being shogun was less about absolute power and more about a constant, exhausting political balancing act. It was a life spent managing treacherous vassals, placating a symbolic emperor, navigating endless court intrigue, and perpetually looking over your shoulder for the next ambitious underling aiming to replace you, often violently. The year is 1192. The place is Kamakura, a coastal town far to the east of the imperial capital. You are Minamoto Yoritomo, and the emperor has just given you a title that will change Japan forever. Your journey to this point has been anything but peaceful. It has been a lifetime steeped in blood, exile, and relentless ambition. You are the scion of the powerful Minamoto clan, a family whose rivalry with the Taira clan has defined the last few decades of brutal civil war, the Genpei War. You saw your father defeated, your brothers killed or scattered. You yourself spent years in exile, a political prisoner under the watchful eye of your enemies. But you endured. You waited. And when the time was right, you raised your banner, rallied your loyal vassals, and led your armies in a final bloody campaign that culminated in the destruction of the Taira at the naval battle of Dan no Ura. Now you stand victorious, but victory in war is not the same as lasting power. Japan is exhausted by decades of conflict. The old system, centered on the refined but politically impotent imperial court in Kyoto, has failed. The real power now lies with the warrior class, the samurai, and with you, their undisputed leader. But how to formalize this power? How to rule without deposing the emperor, a figure considered divine, descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu herself? That would be unthinkable, sacrilegious, and politically disastrous. Your solution is a stroke of pragmatic genius. You petition the cloistered emperor Go-Shirakawa, or rather, you exert immense military pressure until he agrees to grant you a new title. Say I, Taishogun, great general who subdues the barbarians. It is an old, obscure military title, dusted off and repurposed for your needs. It grants you supreme military authority over all of Japan. It does not make you emperor. It makes you the emperor's loyal protector, his sword and shield. In theory. In reality, you are now the master of Japan. You receive the imperial decree in Kamakura, your military base, deliberately chosen for its distance from the stifling intrigues of Kyoto. You do not move to the capital. You establish your own government here, a military government run by warriors for warriors. It is called the Bakufu, literally the tent government, a name evoking the simple rustic headquarters of a field commander. It is a government built not on ancient courtly precedent, but on the hard realities of military power and personal loyalty. You have not just won a war, you have fundamentally rewritten the political structure of Japan. You are the first shogun of the Kamakura shogunate. The title is yours. Now begins the infinitely harder task, keeping it. Your first act as shogun is not to celebrate, but to consolidate. Power, you know, is not given. It is taken, and it must be constantly guarded. Your bakufu in Kamakura needs to become more than just your personal headquarters. It needs to become the functioning government of Japan. You begin by establishing the key administrative bodies that will project your authority across the land. The most important of these is the Samurai Dokoro, the Board of Retainers. This is your HR department, your internal affairs, and your secret police, all rolled into one. Its job is to manage your direct vassals, the samurai sworn to your service, to discipline them, reward them, and, crucially, to keep an eye on them. Loyalty is the bedrock of your rule, but you are not naive enough to trust it implicitly. Next, you establish the Mandokoro, the administrative board. This is the civil heart of your military government, responsible for finances, legal matters, and general administration. You appoint trusted advisors, men known for their bureaucratic skill, rather than their battlefield prowess, though many have both. They begin the laborious task of creating a system of governance that can operate independently of the imperial court in Kyoto. This involves establishing new lines of communication, new methods of record keeping, a whole new administrative infrastructure. It's less glamorous than warfare, but far more essential for long-term stability. You're essentially founding a rival government while pretending it's merely a temporary military command structure. Plausible deniability is key. Finally, you create the Monchujo, the Board of Inquiry. This is your supreme court, dealing with legal disputes among your vassals, particularly those concerning land rights, the ultimate source of wealth and power in this feudal society. You preside over some cases yourself, projecting an image of stern but fair justice. Your rulings aim not just to resolve individual disputes, but to establish clear precedents, to create a body of warrior law that reinforces your own authority and the stability of the samurai class. You are building a system designed to last, a system where disputes are settled by your judges, not by private wars between ambitious lords, though that ideal will prove difficult to maintain. Your bakufu is deliberately rustic compared to the splendors of Kyoto. The buildings are sturdy, functional wood structures, not gilded palaces. The atmosphere is one of military discipline and pragmatic efficiency. Men stride through the courtyards in simple robes or armor, not elaborate court silks. The dominant smell is not perfume, but horse steel and the wood smoke from the barracks cook fires. You are sending a clear message. This is a government of warriors, grounded in the realities of power, not the illusions of courtly rank. You are the CEO of a new, highly militarized corporation, and you are setting up shop far away from the legacy headquarters, complete with your own management team and legal department. Your relationship with the emperor and his court in Kyoto is a masterpiece of political theatre, a delicate dance of outward deference and inner resolve. You hold the military power, the economic power, the real power. But the emperor holds the ultimate legitimacy. He is the divine descendant of the gods, the source of all rank and honor. You need him, or rather, you need his rubber stamp. Your title of shogun was granted by him. Your authority technically flows from him. So, you must play the part of the loyal servant even while you are effectively running the country from your own headquarters hundreds of miles away. You send regular embassies to Kyoto, bearing lavish gifts, fine horses, bolts of silk, gold dust. These are not tokens of friendship. They are carefully calculated investments in maintaining the imperial facade. You request formal court titles for yourself and your key retainers from the emperor. These titles, Minister of the Right, Commander of the Inner Palace Guards, mean nothing in terms of actual power, but they are essential symbols. They drape your military government in the borrowed robes of imperial legitimacy. It's like a successful tech startup CEO insisting on getting an honorary doctorate from an ancient university. It doesn't change the balance sheet, but it looks good on the company website. You maintain a permanent liaison office in Kyoto, the Rokuhara Tandai, staffed by trusted members of your family. Their job is twofold: to represent your interests at court, and to keep a very close eye on the emperor and the powerful, plotting noble families who surround him. You know that the court, though politically weak, is still a hotbed of intrigue. There are always factions dreaming of restoring direct imperial rule, of overthrowing your bakufu. Your spies in Kyoto are essential. You need to know about every whispered conversation, every secret meeting. The emperor may be a god, but his courtiers are merely human, and humans are notoriously unreliable. You yourself rarely visit Kyoto. To do so would be to place yourself within the emperor's symbolic orbit, to become just another courtier jockeying for position. Your power lies in your distance, in your independence. You communicate through letters, through envoys. When absolutely necessary, you might make a formal visit, a carefully choreographed performance of loyalty. You arrive with a large military escort, just for security, of course. You pay your respects at the palace, offer your gifts, receive your meaningless titles, and then you leave, returning to the pragmatic military reality of Kamakura as quickly as possible. You are the loyal dog guarding the palace gates, but you've built your kennel a very long way from the palace, and you hold the leash yourself. Your most constant and most dangerous headache is not the emperor, but your own vassals, the powerful regional lords, the daimyo. These are the men who command their own armies of samurai, who rule vast tracts of land, and whose loyalty is often conditional. You came to power with their support, but they are ambitious men. Each one sees himself as a potential rival, a potential successor. Your position as Shogun is not hereditary by divine right. It is maintained by strength, by cunning, and by the grudging acceptance of the most powerful players in the game. You are less an absolute ruler, and more the chairman of a very unruly board of heavily armed directors. Your primary tool for managing the daimyo is land. You reward loyal service during the Genpei War, with grants of land confiscated from the defeated Taira clan. You strategically place your most trusted vassals in key provinces, creating a network of allies across the country. But land given can also be land taken away. Disloyalty, or even perceived disloyalty, can result in confiscation, ruin, and sometimes execution. Your justice must be swift, decisive, and highly visible. Fear is just as important as favour in maintaining control. You also employ more subtle methods. You encourage strategic marriages, linking powerful families to your own, creating a web of kinship that reinforces political loyalty. You demand that key daimyo spend a portion of the year in Kamakura, attending your court. This is partly to provide you with counsel, but mostly it's a polite form of hostage-taking. While they are in Kamakura, their sons might be educated alongside your own, further binding them to your regime. It's an early version of the Sankin-Kotai system that later shoguns will perfect. Keep your potential rivals close. Keep their families closer. and keep them too busy and too poor from travelling back and forth to cause too much trouble. Disputes between daimyo are a constant threat to stability. Two powerful lords in neighbouring provinces might argue over a border, a water source, or an imagined slight from a generation ago. These disputes can easily escalate into private wars, threatening to plunge the country back into chaos. Your Munchujo, your board of inquiry, is constantly busy mediating these conflicts. You must be seen as a fair arbiter, but your ultimate goal is always to prevent any single daimyo from becoming too powerful, from accumulating enough land and influence to challenge your own position. You are not just a ruler, you are a master strategist, constantly playing one faction off against another, maintaining a delicate, ever-shifting balance of power. It's like herding cats. If the cats were heavily armed, fiercely proud, and constantly plotting to overthrow you. At the heart of your power, the instrument of your will, is the samurai class. You are the Toryo, the chieftain of all warriors. Your bakufu is their government. Your laws protect their interests. In return, you demand their absolute loyalty and their readiness to serve. The samurai are your administrators, your judges, your tax collectors, in effect, and above all, your soldiers. They are the foundation upon which your entire regime rests, but they are a foundation that requires constant maintenance. You cultivate an ideology of warrior loyalty, the beginnings of what later generations will call Bushido, the way of the warrior. The ideal samurai is expected to be fiercely loyal to his lord, brave in battle, skilled in the martial arts, and indifferent to death. This is not just a moral code, it is a political necessity. You need your vassals to obey your commands without question, to fight and die for you when called upon. You reward loyalty lavishly, with land, with titles, with positions of authority. A samurai's honor, his very identity, becomes tied to his service to you, his shogun. But the reality is often messier than the ideal. Samurai are warriors, yes, but they are also landowners, concerned with their own wealth and status. They can be quarrelsome, insubordinate, and fiercely protective of their perceived rights. Your samurai dokoro spends much of its time dealing with disciplinary issues. Samurai who refuse orders, who engage in unauthorized feuds, who abuse their power over the peasantry. You must enforce discipline ruthlessly. An example must be made. A samurai who betrays his lord might face ritual suicide, seppuku, or execution. The code of loyalty must be seen to have teeth. You also understand the importance of keeping your warriors busy. Idleness breeds discontent. You organize regular military exercises, archery contests, and hunting expeditions. These are not just for entertainment. They are a way to maintain military readiness, to foster a sense of camaraderie, and to remind everyone that your government is, at its core, a military one. You yourself participate, demonstrating your own martial skills, reinforcing your image as the supreme warrior. You might spend an afternoon practicing yabusame, mounted archery, galloping down a track, firing arrows at targets with practiced deadly accuracy. It's good exercise, it keeps your skills sharp, and it's excellent PR for the man in charge. The samurai are your sword and shield, but they are a sword that must be kept sharp and pointed in the right direction. Their loyalty is your greatest asset, but their ambition is a constant potential threat. You must balance reward and punishment, honor and fear. You must embody the very warrior ideal you demand of them. You are the shogun, the ultimate samurai, and your survival depends on your ability to command the respect, the fear, and the unwavering service of the thousands of armed men who look to you as their leader. Despite the immense power and the constant demands of your position, your daily life is perhaps less dramatic than the legends might suggest. Much of it is administration. You wake early in your residence within the Bakufu complex. It is a large but relatively austere building, fortified but not opulent. After morning prayers, perhaps a simple Shinto ritual, or increasingly a Zen Buddhist meditation, and a simple meal of rice, fish and soup, your workday begins. And much of that work involves reading, or rather having things read to you. You spend hours in your audience chamber, meeting with your key advisors from the Mandakoro and the Samurai Dokoro. They present reports written on scrolls of paper, reports on tax revenues, collected in rice, of course, reports on legal cases awaiting your judgment, reports from your deputies in the provinces about the harvest, about bandit activity, about the grumblings of a local daimyo. You listen patiently, ask sharp, pointed questions. Your mind must be a repository of information, a constantly updated map of the political and economic landscape of Japan. You make decisions, issue decrees, which are then meticulously recorded by the scribes who sit silently in the corner, their brushes flying across the paper. There are petitioners to see, a delegation of monks from a local temple requesting funds for repairs, a group of merchants seeking permission to establish a new market, a samurai claiming his neighbour has encroached on his land. You listen, dispense justice, grant favours, deny requests. Each interaction is a performance of power, a demonstration of your authority. You must appear wise, decisive and just, even when you are exhausted, bored or unsure. Maintaining the image of the perfect ruler is a crucial part of the job. It's like being a CEO in endless back-to-back meetings, but with the added pressure that a wrong decision could lead to a civil war. There are moments of respite, perhaps an hour spent practicing calligraphy, the disciplined strokes of the brush a form of moving meditation, or a session in the archery range. The focus required a welcome distraction from the weight of your responsibilities. You might attend a no-drama performance, though your taste likely runs more towards the martial epics than the subtle courtly romances favoured in Kyoto. Your evenings are often spent in quiet consultation with your closest advisors, or perhaps reviewing military preparedness reports. Your life is remarkably structured, disciplined, almost monastic in its focus. The security of the realm and the preservation of your own power requires constant, unceasing vigilance. There are no weekends off when you're the Shogun. Just as your rule seems stable, a crisis arrives that threatens to shatter everything you have built. A fleet of ships appears off the coast of Kyushu in the west. They are unlike any ships you have ever seen. They carry warriors from a distant land, warriors led by the great Kublai Khan, the Mongol Emperor of China. The year is 1274. The Mongol invasions have begun. This is an existential threat, an external enemy that requires the fractious samurai class to unite under your command as never before. Panic ripples through Japan. The imperial court in Kyoto offers prayers and performs rituals. You prepare for war. You issue a general mobilization order, calling upon all your vassals, the daimyo and their samurai retainers, to muster their forces and proceed to the defense of Kyushu. This is a crucial test of your authority. Will they obey? Will the old rivalries and resentments prevent a unified defense? You send your most trusted commanders to oversee the preparations. Fortifications are built along the coast. Coastal patrols are established. The entire nation holds its breath. The first invasion is fierce, but ultimately unsuccessful. The Mongols land, their composite bows and organized tactics initially overwhelming the samurai, who are used to more individualized combat. But the samurai fight with a desperate ferocity. And then the gods intervene. A massive typhoon, which the Japanese will later call the kamikaze, the divine wind, descends upon the Mongol fleet, scattering and destroying hundreds of ships. The invasion is repelled. It is seen as a sign of divine favor, a confirmation that Japan is protected by its gods. But you know better than to rely on the weather. Kublai Khan is not a man to give up easily. You know he will return. The Bakufu spends the next 7 years in a state of constant military preparedness. Coastal defences are strengthened. New strategies are developed. The financial strain is immense. You must levy new taxes, demand greater service from your vassals. The unity forged by the first invasion begins to fray under the constant pressure. And then, in 1281, the Mongols return, this time with an even larger fleet, perhaps the largest naval invasion force the world had ever seen. The fighting is even more desperate this time. The samurai, having learned from the first encounter, fight bravely, holding the invaders on the beaches. The battles rage for weeks. And then, it happens again. Another typhoon, even more powerful than the first, sweeps across the sea. The Mongol fleet is annihilated. Japan is saved, seemingly by divine intervention. The kamikaze legend is born. Your rule is secure. But the cost has been enormous. The Bakufu is nearly bankrupt from the war effort. The samurai vassals, who fought and bled for Japan, demand rewards, land, titles, that you cannot afford to give. The victory, paradoxically, sows the seeds of future instability. You have saved Japan from the Mongols, but the internal pressures on your shogunate are now greater than ever. Despite the constant pressures of war and politics, your role as shogun extends beyond the merely military. You are the head of the warrior class, and you have a responsibility to shape its culture, its values. While the imperial court in Kyoto continues its traditions of refined poetry, calligraphy, and courtly romance, the culture of your Bakufu in Kamakura develops along different lines. It is a culture that values simplicity, discipline, and martial prowess. Zen Buddhism, newly arrived from China, finds fertile ground among the samurai. Its emphasis on self-discipline, meditation, and the acceptance of impermanence resonates deeply with the warrior mindset. You yourself become a patron of Zen temples in Kamakura. You find that the practice of Zazen, seated meditation, helps to calm your mind, to bring focus and clarity amidst the chaos of your responsibilities. You might spend an hour each morning in quiet meditation, seeking not enlightenment perhaps, but simply a moment of stillness in a life defined by constant action. You also become a patron of the arts, but of a different kind than the emperor. You might commission great scrolls depicting famous battles, celebrating the bravery and loyalty of your samurai. You support the development of no drama, with its stark, minimalist stage, and its stories often drawn from warrior legends. You might even sponsor a master swordsmith, recognizing that the samurai's sword, the katana, is not just a weapon, but a work of art, a symbol of his soul. The culture you foster is pragmatic, disciplined, and deeply intertwined with the values of the warrior class you lead. Part of your cultural project is also about legitimizing your own rule, ensuring that your family's hold on the shogunate endures. You commission histories like the Azuma Kagami, the Mirror of the East, which chronicle the events of your rise to power and the early years of your Bakufu, carefully shaping the narrative to emphasize your own righteousness and the failings of your enemies. You arrange strategic marriages for your children, weaving your family ever deeper into the fabric of samurai power. You understand that military might alone is not enough. Power must be wrapped in legitimacy, in tradition, in a story that justifies its existence. You are not just a ruler, you are an author, writing the first chapter of a new dynasty. You are old now. The fire of your youth has banked into the steady coals of age. You have held the title of Shogun for decades. You have survived wars, rebellions, assassination attempts, and the endless grinding pressure of ruling a nation of proud and fractious warriors. You sit in your private garden in Kamakura, perhaps watching the carp swim slowly in a quiet pond. Your designated heir, your son, now handles much of the daily administration, just as you once did for your own father or predecessor. You reflect on the strange nature of your power. You are the military dictator of Japan, yet you rule in the name of a divine emperor you rarely see. You command the loyalty of thousands of samurai, yet you know that loyalty is a fragile thing, easily broken by ambition or perceived slight. You live in a state of constant low-level paranoia, aware that the very system you created is designed to be challenged, to be overthrown by the next strongman who believes he can do a better job. The title of Shogun is not a crown passed down by God. It is a heavy sword, constantly needing to be wielded, constantly needing to be defended. You have brought a measure of peace and stability to a land long torn by civil war. You have created a new form of government, one that will shape Japan for the next 7 centuries. You have laid the foundation for a unique warrior culture that will become legendary. But the cost has been high. Your life has been one of constant vigilance, of necessary ruthlessness, of profound isolation. Power, you have learned, is not a destination. It is a precarious perch, a lonely summit where the wind never stops blowing. The Shogun of Feudal Japan was far more than just a military commander. He was a political architect, a cultural patron, a chief executive, and a master strategist, navigating a complex world of shifting loyalties and deeply ingrained traditions. He ruled from behind a screen of ceremony, his power derived from the sword but legitimized by the throne. His life was a constant struggle to maintain control, to balance the demands of his vassals with the needs of the state, to project an image of absolute authority while knowing that authority rested on a foundation of force and fear. He was the indispensable man, the center of the wheel. But his position was always contingent, always under threat. The Shogun held Japan in his hand, but it was a grip that could never, ever relax. The Great Stampede of the American Bison. We're heading out onto the vast, windswept grasslands of the North American Great Plains. We're here to witness one of the most incredible and ultimately tragic spectacles in the natural history of the continent, the age of the American bison. We have this image, don't we? Endless seas of shaggy beasts roaming a pristine wilderness, a symbol of untamed America, of power and freedom. But the brutal reality is that within the span of a single human lifetime, this seemingly infinite resource was driven to the absolute brink of extinction. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was a deliberate, industrial-scale slaughter fueled by greed, government policy, and a shocking disregard for the ecological and human consequences. The year is 1750. The place is the heart of the Great Plains. You are a young hunter of the Lakota Sioux Nation, and the earth is alive. You stand on a small rise, the endless sea of grass stretching before you in every direction, rippling like water in the constant prairie wind. The sky overhead is immense, a vast pale blue dome that seems to press down on the flat earth. But your attention is not on the sky. It is on the ground. You feel it first, more than you hear it. A low, deep, rhythmic vibration coming through the soles of your moccasins. A tremor in the very bones of the earth. Then comes the sound, a low, continuous rumble, like distant thunder that never breaks. And finally, you see them. On the horizon, a dark, moving smudge appears. It grows, spreads, resolves itself into individual shapes. Tatanka, the buffalo. Not a few dozen, not a few hundred, but thousands, tens of thousands. A vast, slow-moving river of shaggy brown bodies, stretching from horizon to horizon. The sound grows louder now, a combination of the thunder of their hooves, the constant low grunting and bellowing, the clicking of horns. The air grows thick with the dust kicked up by their passage, and with the rich, pungent animal smell of the herd. This is the central reality of your world. The bison are not just animals, they are the lifeblood of the plains. They are your grocery store, your hardware store, your clothing supplier, and your spiritual center, all rolled into one massive ambulatory resource. Your people have lived alongside them for 10,000 years, your cultures developing in a deep, intricate symbiosis. You know their habits, their migrations, their moods. You know how to hunt them with a skill and a reverence born of absolute dependence. You watch the great herd flow across the landscape. It moves with a slow, inexorable power, grazing as it goes, the sheer weight of its numbers shaping the very land itself. Their hooves churn the soil, planting seeds. Their grazing prevents the encroachment of forests, maintaining the vast grasslands. Their dung fertilizes the earth. They are the keystone species, the architects of this entire ecosystem. You see calves, protected in the center of the moving mass. You see the huge dominant bulls on the periphery, their massive heads lowered, their small eyes watchful. It is a vision of unimaginable abundance, a seemingly infinite self-renewing resource. The idea that this could ever end is literally unthinkable. It would be like imagining the sky falling or the grass ceasing to grow. This is the world. Your life revolves around following the herd. Your people live a nomadic existence. Your tipis designed to be quickly dismantled and moved, following the bison's seasonal migrations across the vast plains. Every part of the animal is used. The meat provides your sustenance, eaten fresh or dried into jerky and pemmican to last through the lean winter months. The hide provides the covering for your homes, your clothing, your shields, your ropes. The bones are fashioned into tools, needles, scrapers, even toys. The horns are shaped into cups and spoons and elaborate headdresses. The sinews are used for bowstrings and thread. Even the stomach is used as a waterproof container. Nothing is wasted. The hunt itself, before the arrival of the horse, is a difficult and dangerous communal effort. Sometimes it involves a piskun, a buffalo jump. You and dozens of others work together, using flags, shouts, and strategically placed piles of stones to funnel a portion of the herd towards a cliff edge. It requires immense skill, coordination, and an intimate understanding of bison behavior. The final drive is a terrifying, chaotic moment, the animals plunging over the edge in a dusty, thundering cascade. Other times, it involves surrounding a small group on foot, using bows and arrows or lances, a dangerous dance where a single mistake can mean being gored or trampled. But always, the hunt is conducted with respect. Before the chase begins, prayers are offered to the spirit of the bison, thanking it for its sacrifice. After the kill, Rituals are performed to honor the animal, to ensure that its spirit will return, that the great cycle of life will continue. This is not just sentimentality, it is a profound ecological wisdom, born of millennia of coexistence. You take only what you need. You ensure that the source of your life remains strong and vital. You are a predator, yes, but you are a sustainable predator, a part of the great balanced rhythm of the plains. You watch the river of life flow past, and you feel not like a master, but like a humble, grateful participant. Then a new god arrives on the plains. Not a spirit from the sky, but a creature of flesh and blood, an animal unlike anything you have ever seen. Sunkawakan, the sacred dog, the horse. Introduced by the Spanish far to the south, the horse has slowly, inexorably spread northward, traded and raided from tribe to tribe. Its arrival in your lands, perhaps only a generation or two ago, has utterly transformed your world. It is a revolution on 4 legs. Suddenly, you are no longer bound by the speed of your own 2 feet. You are fused with this creature of wind and power. The vast distances of the plains shrink. Following the herds becomes easier. Moving your camps becomes faster. And hunting becomes a different art altogether. The difficult, dangerous work of the buffalo jump or the pedestrian surround becomes obsolete. Now there is the chase. You learn to ride bareback, clinging to the horse's mane, guiding it with the pressure of your knees. You become one of the most skilled light cavalrymen the world has ever known. The bison hunt transforms into a thrilling high-speed pursuit. You ride alongside the galloping herd, your horse matching the bison's thundering pace. You single out your target, a fat cow perhaps, or a young bull. You maneuver your horse closer, ignoring the chaos, the dust, the danger of a fall under those trampling hooves. You draw your bow. You are not using a long war bow. You are using a short, powerful bow, designed for use on horseback. You lean low over your horse's neck, and at the perfect moment, you release the arrow. You aim for the soft spot just behind the ribs, seeking the lungs or the heart. A clean kill is a mark of skill and respect. The horse has made you a far more efficient predator. You can kill more bison more quickly with less risk to yourself. This allows your people to support a larger population. It fuels a golden age of plains culture, a period of relative prosperity, of elaborate artistry, of complex social and political structures. But the horse also introduces new tensions. Wealth becomes measured in horses. Raiding other tribes for horses becomes a central part of warrior culture. The balance begins to shift. The ancient symbiosis between your people and the bison is subtly altered. The efficiency of the hunt, combined with the pressures of intertribal warfare, begins to put a new, though still sustainable pressure on the herds. But the greatest change brought by the horse is not ecological. It is psychological. It gives you a sense of mastery, of power, of freedom that your ancestors never knew. You are the lord of the plains, ranging farther and faster than ever before. Your world feels infinite, your resources boundless. The idea that this golden age, this perfect harmony of horse, man and bison could ever end is still unthinkable. But the seeds of that ending are already being sown, carried on the wind from the east, carried on the iron rails that are beginning to snake their way across the continent. The year is now 1868. You are no longer a Lakota hunter. You are a passenger on a train, heading west across the newly completed transcontinental railroad. You are a tourist, perhaps, or a businessman seeking opportunities on the frontier. The train rattles and sways, its steam engine belching black smoke into the pristine prairie air. Outside your window, the landscape is a blur of endless grass. Then, the train slows. A murmur of excitement runs through the carriage. The conductor points. Buffalo. And there they are. A vast herd, just like the one seen by the Lakota hunter a century before. But your reaction is not one of reverence. It is one of sport. Men rush to the windows, pulling out rifles and pistols. The train slows to a crawl, moving parallel to the herd, and the passengers begin to shoot. It is not a hunt. It is a massacre. They fire indiscriminately into the dense mass of animals. Bison fall, kicking and bleeding, onto the prairie grass. The herd, confused and panicked by the noise and the invisible death, begins to run. But the train keeps pace. The shooting continues until barrels are hot and ammunition is spent. No one gets off the train to butcher the animals. No one collects the hides. The train simply picks up speed and moves on, leaving behind a trail of dead and dying bison, their bodies littering the pristine landscape. This is the beginning of the Great Slaughter. It starts not with a plan, but with a casual, almost thoughtless brutality. The bison are seen not as a source of life, but as a novelty, an obstacle, or simply a convenient moving target. The railroad, the great iron artery of progress, has become a weapon. It brings the shooters. It carries away the results. And it cuts the ancient migration routes of the herds in two, dividing the once unified bison nation into a northern and a southern herd. This casual slaughter from train windows is shocking, but it is small scale compared to what comes next. Back east, a discovery is made. Tanners find that the thick, durable hide of the American bison can be processed into high-quality leather, perfect for industrial machine belts, for harnesses, for the soles of shoes. Suddenly, the bison is no longer just a source of meat or a tourist attraction. It is a commodity, a walking gold mine, and the rush is on. A new kind of man appears on the plains. He is not a settler, not a soldier, not a cowboy. He is the professional buffalo hunter. He comes from all walks of life. Ex-soldiers from the Civil War, failed prospectors, restless farm boys seeking adventure and fortune. He is drawn by the promise of quick money. A single bison hide can fetch $2 or $3 back east, a significant sum at the time. And there are millions of bison, free for the taking. It is a perfect storm of technological advancement and unregulated capitalism. You are now one of these hunters. Your primary tool is not a horse or a bow. It is the Sharp's rifle. A heavy, powerful single-shot rifle, firing a large caliber bullet with astonishing accuracy over long distances. It is nicknamed the Big 50, and it is a killing machine. You do not chase the herd. That is inefficient. You find a high spot, a bluff overlooking a grazing herd. You set up your rifle on a tripod, and you begin the grim, methodical work of extermination. Your goal is the stand you shoot the lead cow or bull. The other bison, confused by the lack of a clear threat, the shot comes from hundreds of yards away, will often mill around their fallen leader in confusion. You then proceed to shoot another and another, picking them off one by one. You are a sniper. Your target's unsuspecting. Your method brutally efficient. A skilled hunter can kill 100 bison or more in a single stand without ever moving from his spot. The air grows thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. The prairie grass becomes littered with the dark, still shapes of the dead. But your job is not done. You are the hunter, the killer. Following behind you is another team, the skinners. They move in with their wagons and their razor-sharp knives. Their job is even more brutal and disgusting. They descend on the fallen bison like vultures. They make a few quick practiced cuts around the neck and legs, then attach a rope to the hide. A team of horses or mules pulls, and the entire hide peels off the carcass with a sickening tearing sound. It is rough, bloody, back-breaking work, performed under the blazing sun, surrounded by the stench of death and the buzzing of flies. The skinners work with a desperate speed, trying to harvest the hides before the carcasses begin to putrefy. They take only the hide. The rest of the animal, tons of meat, bone and organs, is left to rot where it fell. The prairie becomes a vast, stinking boneyard. The scale of this operation is difficult to comprehend. In the peak years of the slaughter, from the early 1870s to the early 1880s, millions of bison are killed each year. Special hide towns spring up along the railroads, places like Dodge City, Wichita, Fort Griffin. Their streets are lined not with saloons, but with mountains of dried, stiff bison hides, waiting to be shipped back east. These stacks can be 20 or 30 feet high, stretching for entire city blocks. The smell is overpowering. Trains arrive empty and leave loaded with nothing but hides, thousands upon thousands of them. You are part of an industry, a vast, efficient and utterly unsustainable machine of destruction. You make good money, perhaps hundreds of dollars in a single season. But the work is brutal, lonely and morally corrosive. You live for months on the open plains. Your only companions, your skinning crew, and the endless silent herds you are systematically erasing from existence. You become numb to the killing, numb to the waste. It is just a job. The bison are not animals. They are walking dollar bills. You are harvesting a resource, and like any resource rush, the goal is to get as much as you can, as fast as you can, before it runs out. And it is running out, faster than anyone could have possibly imagined. While the profit motive drives the hunters, another, darker factor begins to influence the slaughter. High-ranking officials in the US Army and the Department of the Interior begin to realize that the bison hunters are, unintentionally at first, solving a major strategic problem for them: the Plains Indians. The nomadic tribes, the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Kiowa, are proving incredibly difficult to defeat militarily and to confine to reservations. Their entire way of life, their freedom, their ability to resist, is built upon the bison. If the bison disappear, the Plains tribes will have no choice but to surrender. This realization leads to a deliberate, if often unofficial, policy of encouraging the slaughter. General Philip Sheridan, a famous Civil War hero and now a commander in the Indian Wars, is reported to have said in the Texas legislature, "The buffalo hunters have done more in the last 2 years, and will do more in the next year, to settle the vexed Indian question than the entire regular army has done in the last 30 years. Let them kill, skin and sell until the buffaloes are exterminated." While perhaps apocryphal, the sentiment was widely shared. The army provides ammunition to the hunters. The railroads offer them special rates. The destruction of the bison becomes an instrument of war, a tool of cultural genocide. You, the hide hunter, are now an unwitting soldier in this war. You may see yourself as just a businessman, exercising your right to harvest a public resource. But your actions have profound political and military consequences. Every bison you kill is another nail in the coffin of the Plains Indian way of life. Every hide you ship back east is another step towards the final conquest of the American West. The vast open prairie, once a space of freedom for both bison and native peoples, is being systematically emptied, cleared, made ready for the next wave of transformation: the cattle ranches and the wheat farms. The slaughter is not just an ecological tragedy, it is a human tragedy as well. You see the bewildered, desperate faces of the native hunters as they survey the boneyards that were once their hunting grounds. You hear the stories of starvation on the reservations, of proud warriors reduced to begging for government rations. The destruction of the bison is the destruction of a people's independence, their culture, their spirit. It is a slow, grinding, and brutally effective campaign, waged not just with bullets, but with the cold, hard logic of economic and ecological warfare. You are making a living, but the cost of that living is the death of a world. By the mid-1870s, the Great Southern Herd, which once numbered in the tens of millions, is virtually gone. The focus of the slaughter shifts north, to the territories of Montana and the Dakotas, the last stronghold of both the Bison and the free-roaming Plains tribes, particularly the Lakota Sioux, under leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Here, the final tragic act of this drama unfolds. The hunters push relentlessly north, armed with their powerful rifles and driven by the dwindling supply of hides. You are now hunting in the Yellowstone River Valley. The landscape is different here, hillier, closer to the mountains, but the work is the same. Find a herd, set up your stand, kill until your shoulder aches and your barrel is too hot to touch. The skinners move in. The cycle of destruction continues. But here, the hunt is more dangerous. You are in the heart of Lakota territory. Hunting parties sometimes clash. A hunter might be found dead at his stand, his rifle gone, his scalp taken. The stakes are higher now. It is not just about profit. It is about survival. In 1876, the tension explodes. Gold is discovered in the Black Hills, sacred land to the Lakota. Prospectors flood in, violating the treaties. The US Army moves to protect them. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse lead a coalition of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors in resistance. At the Battle of the Little Bighorn, they achieve a stunning victory, wiping out General Custer and his 7th Cavalry. It is the high watermark of native resistance, but it is a Pyrrhic victory. The defeat galvanizes the US government. The army pours troops into the region, determined to crush the resistance once and for all. And the buffalo hunters play their part. The army sees them as allies, providing intelligence, acting as scouts, and their relentless destruction of the northern herd is just as effective as any cavalry charge. By the late 1870s, the northern herd is collapsing just as the southern herd did. Sitting Bull, faced with the starvation of his people, leads a band of followers into exile in Canada. Crazy Horse surrenders and is killed under suspicious circumstances. The last pockets of resistance are extinguished. The Plains Wars are over. The bison and the way of life they supported are gone. The speed and totality of the destruction is almost unimaginable. In 1800, estimates placed the bison population at 30 to 60 million animals, perhaps more. By 1884, there are fewer than 400 wild bison left in the entire United States, hiding in the remote Pelican Valley of the newly established Yellowstone National Park. A handful more survive in small private herds, kept by ranchers who had the foresight, or perhaps just the peculiar hobby, of preserving a few specimens. An animal that had defined a continent for 10,000 years had been effectively erased in less than 20. You are now a bone picker. The hide market has collapsed. There are simply no more bison left to hunt. But there is one last grim harvest to be made. The prairies are littered with the skeletal remains of the millions of bison slaughtered over the previous decade. These bones, bleached white by the sun and wind, have value. They can be ground into fertilizer or used in the process of refining sugar. So, a new industry emerges. Men, often former hunters or destitute settlers, wander the plains with wagons, gathering the bones. It is a ghoulish, heartbreaking task. You walk through a silent landscape that was once filled with the thunder of hooves. Now, the only sound is the dry rattle of bones as you toss them into your wagon. You find skulls, vertebrae, great piles of leg bones. Sometimes you find entire skeletons, mired in a dry wash, the ghostly outlines of the stand where they fell. You pile your wagon high. At the railroad sidings, mountains of bones replace the mountains of hides from a decade earlier. They are shipped back east, the final dusty remnants of the great herds turned into phosphates for farmers' fields. This is the final, ignominious chapter of the Great Slaughter. The prairie has been stripped bare. First the hides, then the bones. Even the memory of the bison is being ground into dust and scattered. You look out over the empty plains. The silence is deafening. The sheer, staggering scale of the loss is hard to comprehend. It is an ecological holocaust, committed not out of malice, perhaps, but out of a combination of greed, ignorance, and a profound failure of the imagination. No one could truly believe that something so numerous, so fundamental, could actually disappear. Until it did. You are an old man now, living in a small town on the prairie. The world outside your window bears no resemblance to the world of your youth. The endless sea of grass has been replaced by a checkerboard of wheat fields and barbed wire fences. The silence is broken not by the rumble of bison, but by the whistle of a train. You sometimes see a small, fenced-in herd on a local ranch, a tourist attraction, a living museum exhibit. They look smaller, sadder than the wild beasts you remember. You remember the hunt, the dust, the overwhelming power and presence of the great herds. You remember the Lakota hunters you sometimes encountered, men whose entire universe was intertwined with the animal you were destroying. You carry the weight of that memory, the weight of that loss. The destruction of the bison was not just the end of a species, it was the end of a world. It was the end of the wild, untamed prairie. It was the end of the free-roaming plains cultures. It was the moment when industrial America finally and brutally conquered the continent. The story of the bison is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the speed and finality of extinction. It is a story about the complex, often destructive relationship between human societies and the natural world. It is a story about the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and the instrumentalization of nature for political ends. But it is also, perhaps, a story of hope. From those few hundred survivors, through the dedicated efforts of early conservationists and native tribes, the American bison has been brought back from the absolute brink. Today, there are hundreds of thousands, their numbers growing, their presence slowly returning to portions of their ancestral lands. The Great Stampedes, the seas of millions, will never return. That world is gone forever. But the bison endures. A shaggy, potent symbol of the American wilderness. A living reminder of the staggering abundance that was lost. And a fragile testament to the possibility of redemption. Of acknowledging our mistakes and perhaps, just perhaps, learning to share the earth once more. The thunder of their hooves may be quieter now, but if you listen closely, on the wind that still sweeps across the endless plains, you can almost hear the echo